What if the moment you thought you were safe was the moment the nightmare began? What if, after surviving the crash, the real horror started inside the plane itself? This is the story of Flight 28, a flight that made it back to the ground but never truly landed, a flight where the fire didn't come from the sky, it came from within. A calm morning, it was supposed to be routine, a bright, ordinary morning at the airport. Families, business travelers, and crew, all preparing for a short domestic journey. The aircraft, a twin-engine jet, gleamed in the sunlight. Technicians had completed the final checks. Fuel topped off, engines ready. Everything looked perfect. But perfection in aviation can be a cruel illusion. Sometimes, danger hides behind the hum of machinery. Sometimes it waits, quiet, patient, until one tiny spark awakens it. Inside the cabin, laughter filled the air. Children pressed their faces against the windows. Flight attendants smiled as they performed safety demonstrations. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady and confident. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 28. Nobody knew this would be the last announcement they'd ever hear from him. Takeoff into trouble. As the aircraft raced down the runway, the engines roared with controlled fury. The plane lifted smoothly into the sky, climbing through pale clouds. But only minutes after takeoff, a strange vibration rippled through the fuselage. It was subtle at first, like turbulence. Then, a sharp bang, followed by the shriek of alarms. Red lights flashed across the cockpit. The right engine had failed. The captain's hands tightened around the controls. He and the first officer exchanged quick glances, calm but alert. Training kicked in. They reduced power, stabilized the aircraft, and declared an emergency. The voice over radio was calm. "Mayday, Mayday, Flight 28, engine failure, returning to airport." The passengers didn't panic yet. Many thought it was just a precaution. After all, modern planes are designed to fly with one engine. They didn't know that the fire had already started. Deep inside the wounded engine, the fire awakens. At first, smoke was faint, a thin gray mist curling from the engine's edge. But within moments, flames burst outward, feeding hungrily on leaking fuel. Outside the cabin windows, a passenger gasped, "Fire! The engine's on fire!" Panic spread like wildfire through the rows. The flight attendants rushed down the aisles, trying to calm everyone. Inside the cockpit, warning buzzers screamed, "Fire! Right engine!" The pilots pulled the fire handle, cutting fuel flow and discharging extinguishers. But it was too late. The fire was too intense, too fast. The captain's voice trembled for the first time. "Brace for impact." The landing that never ended. The aircraft descended rapidly toward the airport. Fire trucks were already rolling onto the runway. Thick black smoke trailed behind the jet, painting the sky with dread. Inside the cabin, passengers prayed, screamed, and clutched each other's hands. Mothers held children tight. Some whispered the names of their loved ones. The landing gear extended. Sparks erupted as the plane touched down, hard. The aircraft bounced once, then slammed onto the tarmac, skidding sideways. Miraculously, it stopped in one piece. Cheers erupted. People cried, laughed, clapped. They thought they had survived. They were wrong. Because what came next was worse than the crash itself. Inside the trap, the cabin was filled with smoke. It wasn't the clean smoke of burned fuel. It was thick, black, suffocating. It clawed at lungs, filled eyes with tears. The flight attendants shouted for everyone to unbuckle and move toward the exits. But as passengers tried to stand, panic broke out. Screams drowned out the alarms. The fire, still raging in the right engine, had spread to the fuselage. Flames licked the cabin walls. Plastic panels dripped molten droplets from the ceiling. The lights flickered, then died. Inside that dark tube, people stumbled over seats, over each other. The air was poisoned now, thick with toxic fumes. Every breath burned. Every second mattered. The evacuation begins. The forward left exit opened first, a burst of white light and wind. A slide deployed, fluttering in the smoke. A few passengers tumbled down, coughing and gasping for air. But on the right side, the fire was too close. Flames blocked the exits. The heat was unbearable. Even the aluminum skin of the aircraft began to warp. Crew members fought desperately, shouting instructions, pushing terrified passengers toward the safe side. But chaos took over. Someone fell on the stairs. Another tried to grab their bag. Seconds wasted, lives lost. Within 2 minutes, the cabin was fully engulfed. The sound of explosions echoed across the tarmac. Firefighters tried to get close, but the heat pushed them back. Inside, 55 souls never made it out. The silence after fire. When the fire was finally extinguished, the wreckage was unrecognizable. Twisted metal, charred seats, a blackened shell of what was once Flight 28. Rescue workers moved silently through the debris. They didn't shout. They didn't need to. The silence said enough. Among the wreckage, melted watches still ticked faintly, frozen at the time of the disaster. Luggage tags fluttered in the hot wind, their names burned away. For investigators, it was one of the most haunting scenes they had ever faced, because the plane had landed safely. Everyone should have survived, but the fire and the design turned survival into a death trap. Investigation, the hidden enemy. When investigators examined what remained, the truth began to unfold. The fire had started in the right engine after a turbine failure. A piece of metal had torn through the fuel line, igniting a blaze that couldn't be contained. But that wasn't the worst part. The real horror was what happened after landing. The evacuation was delayed, doors jammed, communication failed. The slide systems didn't inflate fast enough. And inside the cabin, materials designed decades ago, seat covers, panels, carpeting, released toxic gases when burned. Most of the 55 who died didn't die from flames. They died from smoke inhalation, trapped only meters from the exit. The design flaw. The MD-11's cargo systems and fire suppression setup weren't meant for prolonged ground fires after engine failure. Critical systems, including hydraulics and cabin pressure valves, were positioned near fuel lines. A single rupture could cascade into disaster. Experts called it a ticking time bomb of design. Even after earlier incidents, the warnings were overlooked. No one expected an engine fire to spread this fast, this violently. But Flight 28 proved otherwise. And in aviation, every oversight has a price. That morning, the price was 55 lives. The human cost. In the aftermath, families gathered in silence near the airport. Rows of candles flickered in the wind, fighting to stay lit, just like the memories of those lost. One mother clutched a charred boarding pass, the only thing recovered of her son. Another survivor, covered in burns, whispered that she still heard the screams when she closed her eyes. For months, the sound of that explosion echoed in the minds of rescuers and investigators. It wasn't just a fire. It was a betrayal of trust, of design, of life itself. Reforms and regret. The accident led to sweeping changes in evacuation procedures. New rules required faster slide deployment. New materials were mandated, ones that wouldn't release deadly fumes under heat. And aircraft engines were redesigned to contain internal explosions. But safety regulations always come too late. Only after disaster do we learn how fragile safety truly is. Only after fire do we realize how little time we ever have. Flight 28 became a lesson written in ash. A warning that even survival can be an illusion. The ghosts of Flight 28. Night after night, ground crew workers say the runway feels different. The air still smells faintly of burnt metal when it rains. Some say they hear faint voices near the old terminal, whispers carried by the wind. A firefighter who was there that day once said, "I can still hear the screams, even when it's quiet." Maybe it's memory, maybe it's guilt, or maybe something of Flight 28 still lingers, refusing to rest. Because sometimes tragedy burns so deep into the earth that even time can't erase it. In aviation, every number hides a name. Every regulation hides a story. And behind every tragedy lies one haunting truth: the smallest flaw can ignite the largest disaster. Flight 28 was more than an accident. It was a chain reaction of human error, mechanical weakness, and misplaced faith. 55 people walked onto that plane believing they'd see tomorrow. They never did. If this video surprised you, so subscribe for more haunting tales of aviation, fate, and human courage. Hit the bell icon to never miss another journey into the skies where fear and truth collide.